Hey, Yaron, how you doing?
Hey man, I'm doing good, David. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. How you been? It's been a
Awesome.
while.
It has been a while. I mean, we're going on. It's definitely 10 plus years for sure, right? We were definitely 10 plus years as far as when we first met.
Well,
Um,
you had a non-face moment in Clandestine where you jumped out of the back of the truck. That was about 7, 8 years ago.
It's your tank, huh? I like that. It's better.
Whoa! Hey, stay in the car! Stay in! Get down! Whoa, whoa, whoa! Get back to the van! Get back to the van! Stay in! Get down! Get down! Do not move! Stop! Stop where you are! Hands down! Get down! Do not move! What is it? Do not move! Stay on the ground! Stay where you are! Hodges, what the hell is going on? Hodges, what is that back there? Hodges, what is in there? It smells like piss! Hodges, I need fire and ambulance. The route 112.
I know, man. I know. I know. Only 7, 8 years ago, I feel like more, but yeah, I
Yeah,
remember the scene. I remember.
2013.
I
Well, yeah,
remember.
you were supposed to jump out and then eat dirt, and I was gonna try to get you like cake or something instead of dirt, and
Yeah,
you're like, "No, I'll eat dirt," and I was
yeah.
like, I don't know, and then we couldn't connect the actual close up of you to do that, but that was you jumping out for anybody that saw the
I
movie.
totally remember. I remember jumping out, putting the dirt in my mouth, and just like, dude, part of the job. Got to do it, man. And you guys were awesome. Anyway. I didn't mind. It's like just being invited, just being a part of the project was awesome. That big deal. You know,
Yeah.
big deal. It's just to be on set. I can name tons of stories. Being on cement. Doing student films back when on a rainy day with
Hmm.
my head on the cement for like most of the day. That type of stuff.
Yeah.
You either love it or you don't. All
Yep.
in. You know.
Yep. No, it's very true. It's very
Yeah.
true. So what
Totally.
have you been? I know that we met, geez, we met, I think, like you said, almost 10 years ago. I think a little longer than 10. And I think it
Yeah.
was wasn't it a networking group we met at? It was like a film
I
networking group.
I actually back then I ran a group called the Dedicated Actors Group,
Hmm.
and I was basically working. We had mutual interests. We had mutual experiences. The idea of bringing people together to make something, to make a project, right? And so we met. I had actually reached out to you. We might have met in person, but I do remember kind of discovering you and your production company at the time, and your mantra of working together to make stuff, and I reached out to you to do an interview, and that's how we originally met.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and after that, it was just thank God for social. We stayed connected. It was nice to be on a project.
Yeah, I remember that interview. We were in a producing partner, Kate's apartment, I think, and we
Yeah,
were all, her AC wasn't working, and we were all sweating. So we were drenched. All of us were totally drenched with sweat. It was
I remember that. You guys were good sports. You guys were awesome.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So what do you got going on now? I mean, I know we talked a little bit before, but you said that you're still doing acting, but you also have some other new things
Yeah,
going on.
absolutely. I mean, my acting career, very grateful for it. Since back then, I've built up a decent amount of credits in various projects, from indie films um, to small screen, big screen. Things that ended up on Netflix, Amazon Prime. I've got a project that I have a small part in. That's my first Hollywood feature film project that's releasing next year. I'm just small part, uh,
It's great
but
though.
that's my first studio feature film.
Hmm.
As far as yeah, I mean, the most recent thing I did on network television was FBI. An episodic, and a nice role in that. Um, some of my favorites are like Orange is the New Black on Netflix. I had a reoccurring on that, which was really sweet. And you know what? There's a nice short story behind that. One of the worst auditions I ever had. It was honestly, it was a really bad audition. I don't know what happened. I was so prepared, super prepared, and my tongue was tied. I was stuttering. It was just a mess. I couldn't get my lines out. Casting director was so kind. She was so good to me, and she's like, you know what? Don't worry about it. It's okay. Read off the paper. I said, no, I memorized it. She said, no, it's okay. Read off the paper.
Hmm.
Read off the paper. Didn't feel like didn't feel 100%. And she was very nice. She goes, you know what? Don't make such a big deal. Who knows? You may end up booking it. She just, that's literally, she's like paraphrasing a bit. So I looked at her with, kind of like a humbled smile. And, she's very kind. There was another person in the room. I don't know who she was. I don't know if she was an assistant or if she was like one of the writers or something. I honestly don't know. But I remember leaving, and I remember being really unhappy because it was an awesome part. And I think 2 days passed. My manager calls me and she's like, Yaron, guess what? I'm like, what? She's like, you booked Orange. I'm like, what? You booked Orange is the New Black. I'm like, something's wrong. I said, something's wrong. Really, this is one of the worst auditions I ever had. Nope. They wanted you, and that was it. Anyway, the moral of the story, and it gets even better, is maybe there was something right about, not that I'm special. Yeah, you know, I just think that maybe there was something about the way I did say the lines. Maybe it was my look. Maybe it was my type. Maybe it was also that I did have other credits and experience, and the cast director knew that and knew that I probably was better than I was presenting myself at that moment. And I do share this moment with people. I think a lot of people don't like to share their less than positive moments as far as, you know, how effective they were in auditioning, let's say. But I think it's important because what ended up happening, so the rest is history. I did great on set. I'm very proud of the work, and I have another wonderful credit. But what happened additionally, this was a one-day role, just a co-star. And a couple of months later, I got a call from my manager saying, hey, they want you back. There was another episode. It was yet another small part, but they felt it was appropriate for it. So I played a police officer, and they needed that police officer again to appear in another scene that was relevant. And they decided to bring me back. So moral of the story, you know, if there were anything I would have done different, I wouldn't have been so down on myself in that moment. And I would have been more upbeat and more positive and smiley and not kind of beating myself up in the room while I'm with the cast director who's being very supportive. That's a huge takeaway. And also I realized that, look, you can screw up on your audition. There must be something. If you're right, they just feel you're right. You know, and yes, you should prepare your lines. You should know everything like I did. But if you stumble, they're human and they know that you're human, and they'll probably work with you if everything else is on point. So anyway, yeah. Lots of other credits. I mean, I could talk about other stuff as well. I did, before I do, David, do you want to interject? Because I can go on for a while. I don't want to monopolize all the chat.
No, I think that it is interesting. I mean, when someone having auditioned people now, you know, for parts and whatnot, sometimes you just really like somebody. You want them to be right.
Yeah.
And if they come in and they're like just having a bad day, I've been there so many times with auditions that I just want to find a way to help them feel okay, you know, about what they're doing. And that's not always, you know, the case. Sometimes I've gone into auditions and casting directors like hate your guts as soon as you walk in because they're hungry or whatever.
I've had that too, man. I know you're right. Yeah.
But you also like everything. You also meet some people, some casting folks who are very nice and they want you to succeed. And they're getting a kick out of what you're doing, and it's a lot of fun. But you know, my thing is always, and it's one of the reasons why we started doing our own work, was just always believing in yourself and having that inner strength and focus. So it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, if they're hungry or not hungry. You know, did you have a good time? Did you do your stuff? And it's, you know, for you, you know, I've watched over the years through social media and just everything else, just, you know, you racking up roles and getting more and more work. And, you know, that's great. You know, I remember when we first started, you were like, yeah, you know, didn't you have a rap group before you started acting back in the day?
Yeah, man. When I was, I mean, give or take, it kind of began around 18. It was like my, but kind of out of high. I was playing with poetry and writing in high school, sort of, but wasn't rapping. And then at some point in my first year of college, I just started to think about just putting this stuff down to, you know, to lyrics, spoken word, poetry, and putting some beats to stuff. And yeah, so then I decided to pursue rapping seriously as a profession. And I partnered up with a buddy back then. His name's Omar, but his stage name was OQ. And him and I hit it off. We had met at Barnes and Nobles. We worked at a bookstore together. You know, you remember those days?
Yeah, I do.
So he was a good dude. We hit it off. We started writing together. We took the show on the road. We literally were coming up around the time that guys like Biggie was coming up. I mean, that's our history. You know, depending on how close someone's followed hip hop, you know, we were during a lot of people what they consider the golden years of hip hop. You know, Naughty by Nature, Black Sheep, Tribe Called Quest, and on and on and on. Those golden years of hip hop.
Yeah.
And we, you know, we were small players in that big field, and had some success. You know, we managed to get on a label. We managed to, and these were different times. It's not like you could put your music out on the net. The net didn't exist yet.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, you went knocking on doors to get a lawyer, to get an A&R, you know, person from a label to look at you, to listen to you. We were doing well, and then, you know, life happens, and you know, there's distractions, and, you know, there's also, I think, making that art, that puzzle, and we just talked about that before we started recording the interview. You know, how do you make ends meet? How do you pay bills and stay an artist? You know, how do you engage in the industry, whether it's music, whether it's entertainment, and still make a living? And we came to that juncture where we were like, hey, do we continue this? You know, at the time I ended up getting, you know, fall in love, getting married very young. And I was starting to think more about stability. My daughter was on the way, my oldest daughter, you know, so I had to start thinking like, hey, how much longer am I going to pursue this music career that isn't quite, it's working, we're getting out, people are liking us, the marketing's there, the brand is there, if you will, but the money's not forthcoming.
Yeah.
And so I'm very much though happy to have had that experience and have that under my belt.
Yeah.
And and eventually I knew I was going to get back into the arts somehow, and I did. I started singing, you know, before I became an actor. I took a break as far as writing lyrics and rapping lyrics, and I started just getting involved in various singing things, and I started to cover bands. So I used to take the opportunity to work with bands that kind of toured, you know, played a bit, just again, covers, and I would front, and I would sing just rock songs and stuff. And that was an awesome experience. Never did that for money. It was more of a hobby.
Right.
But that was a lot of fun. And while I was building a career as a software developer, as an entrepreneur, I was in finance for a little bit. Eventually, I knew I was going to come back to the arts. And that's when around 2007, fast forward, right? I decided to pursue acting seriously. Just kind of happened slowly. I kind of started doing background work. I got a small part in a theater project, community theater thing. And then eventually I decided to pursue it full time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know when we met, like you were saying, it was interesting. I feel like it's now that we've had some distance from it, I feel like the late 2000s was a very interesting time because digital was starting, this revolution was starting of digital.
Yeah.
Where people were like saying, I don't need, you know, $500,000 just for my film stock. It's like,
right,
you know,
right.
I could make a whole movie for what before would have just been, you know, the film or the cost of this or that or whatever. Exactly. Probably exaggerating that price a little bit, but you know, we kind of entered in the same junction of we can start collecting people together who have equal perspectives and mindsets and try to work and all rise as a group. And that's, you had your group, the dedicated actors, and then we had ours, and you know, and we met, and there's a lot of people that have stayed with it. I was talking to another guest, and he was saying how he went to Circle in the Square for school, and he said as time has gone on, people either moved to LA and he just lost track of them and they just kind of disappeared, or they got married, or they just left, you know. And he said he's just kind of seen this like attrition, you know, as time has gone on. So it's cool to be able to talk to people who have started roughly around the same time as myself and still doing it, and you're now doing something else. You're what's this next thing you mentioned? Because I didn't even know about it, so I'm going to be finding out about it while you're talking to us.
So I like every actor, I've always tried to figure out how do I make ends meet and stay in, right? When I left the industry as a full-time executive for like publicly held companies, I was a software developer, and I was a marketer. You know, I kind of worked my way up to eventually being you know, VP executive level guy who's in the room with big brands looking to market themselves online. So, you know, that was in my my wheelhouse right from the beginning. That was just the skills that I had, the technology and the marketing. And I've always had a sort of small business literally on the side, even when I worked corporate. And I would kind of figure out the overall vision, and then I would, my ex at the time would actually help me run the day to day, and then I would get involved when I needed to if things weren't working out or just needed tweaking. So I was used to this idea of like I'm working on one thing and developing another. And so with my acting, as you know, we all do anything and everything. There's some people who, you work in a restaurant, you drive Uber, you do whatever you got to do. And for me personally, I was mounting, like, talk to LA. When I went out to LA maybe 3 times, right? And each time I started to figure out how can I make a living while I'm spending some time out there. And eventually I got smart. I rented a car and I started mounting televisions for like 60, 80 bucks a pop. I'd advertise on Craigslist. And then there was a company that also did on demand for stuff like that, like mounting TVs and all that sort of stuff. So I was out there. Eventually I finally figured out how to make ends meet. But I also knew that, look, I've got ideas, I've got things I can do. I can build a business, I can grow it. And why don't I utilize all these contacts and relationships that I'm developing in the industry and see how I can help, And as it turns out, a lot of actors like me and a lot of production companies, a lot of producers and writers and actors like yourself need someone to help them market. They figure out their brand, right? Actors, need to develop a brand, just like any product behind any company, in front of any company, right? And so it was a very natural fit for me to sit down and talk with my peers and say, what are you doing as far as your marketing efforts? If you're a production company or if you're an actor, do you have a website? Do you have a social media presence? Are you doing email marketing, content marketing, SEO, and on and on and on? And, I'm talking to people and some people are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And some people are like, yeah, of course I have an idea. Of course I do social. Yes. But tell me more about SEO. Or yeah, of course I do SEO. But, like, what do you mean by content marketing? What exactly? Just videos, blogs, blah, blah, blah. So I've been helping people do that. And the company name is yummyzest. That's yummyzest.com.
Okay.
And I'm very focused on building what I call people sites, right? Because I build a lot of actor sites, but more and more people from different backgrounds are coming, freelancers, writers, artists. I'm about to build a website for a UFC fighter. It was actually my coach. My son and I are training in MMA and martial arts, which has also been a part of my life in bits and pieces.
That's cool.
Since childhood as well. And so that's what I do now. So what I do now is I have a company. It's a digital marketing agency. And I work with, people in our industry for sure. And I work with people who also sell stuff, if not services, products like e-commerce. And for me, it's been a way to honestly just utilize. I think, you talked about longevity in the business, right? You talked about who's kind of stuck it out, and it's hard. It's a hard ride. My daughter, who's around the same age that I was thinking about kind of joining the arts, leaving the arts. My oldest is 25. Okay. And she was my firstborn, had her very young. She's pursuing writing and acting, but she also has a background in law. So she can transition, go back into law in some way, but it's really hard. I mean, if you're going to be in the industry, you have to, we're not all going to be the 2 to 5% that works all the time. If we're talking about in front of the camera or even behind the camera, quite frankly, right? The biggest shock to me in the industry was realizing that the directors that I'm trying to pitch to, the casting directors, even they always have to work really hard to get the next gig. And it's so uncertain. So for me, I figured out a way to leverage, and still working on it, all of the time and effort and energy as far as social capital, and how can I utilize more than a decade's worth of time in the industry and at the same time bring something to the table to help other people do well in the industry. And I think I think I'm doing that. I'm well on my way to doing that through yummyzest. So
that's great. Yeah. When did you start it?
So it's probably been a little more than a year and a half now, maybe almost 2 years. Naturally, it started around COVID beginning, and late 2019, early 2020. I, like everyone else, was trying to figure out what's going on. The industry's kind of shut down. The world's shut down. I knew from my experience as a marketer, I knew things were going to go very digital. If we talk about business for a minute, if we look at the waves, right? Like real estate, 2007, when the bubble burst, you know, real estate took a massive dump, right? All of a sudden there's less brick and mortars out there, even in as far as commercial, right? So people had to deal with having less stores and less places to go shopping in. So what did that do? That created more online stuff. That Amazon sort of tree was growing and growing and growing. And you know, here we are, fast forward, there used to be products that, you know, you would buy in a store that you would never think about buying online, like clothing or furniture. And it only took a matter of time for people's perspectives and ways of shopping to change. And Amazon's certainly been a huge contributor to that, but also many things, the internet, you know, again, the 2007 burst, you know, all that stuff. Well, here we're going through a new transition. COVID starts, all of a sudden we're realizing, can we really work from anywhere on the planet, still get our jobs done? Do we really all have to be in the same room to actually get things done? We're finding out that we don't. And there's people that I have clients that are like, well, no, my business definitely, we can't, you know, I have martial artist instructors. No, I need to be in the room. And up to a point, they're correct. But there's also some advantages to teaching someone through a camera. You know, you're taking a little more time to express your idea now because you can't put your hands on them. So that's also making the other person on the other end of the camera try to figure things out a little more, and is a little more focused and involved. Or I have some musical instructors teaching you how to play guitar. Well, again, it's the same situation. Well, no, I need to be there with the rhythm and this and that. Well, no, you just adapt, you change. You know, there's new value. There's some things that you're used to doing that you may need to do in a new way, yes, but in the end, it can be done. And that's where we're at now. So that's number one. Number two, it's all digital all the time now. I mean, there's people need digital services. You know, it's so here's the new thing, the new evolution. And 2 years ago, I said, you know, I can help people who've never done business online or presented themselves online or have and want to do it better. Here I come, you know, and for me, you know, I don't have like tons of resources, you know, it's me and I have a small team depending on the size of the budget. But my sweet spot is working with small to mid-sized companies, you know, or owner operator entrepreneurs. And I thrive in that. I love working with them because I can relate to that experience. I'm a serial entrepreneur. So that's what's going on. That's, you know, I figured out how to ideally stay an artist. As far as my acting, that's not going to stop. I plan on being an actor for the rest of my life. You know, and I can't tell you I've solved the problem of balancing pursuing acting work and work, you know. It's hard, man. You know, I'm always looking for advice and sharing what has and hasn't worked. Yeah, it's not easy. I'm not going to pretend it is. You know, you get what you put into something, and I know that when you take away a little bit from the acting, you know, to give to your love life, your personal life, your work life, you know, your work life, day job life, right? It's going to take away from your acting, whether you like it or not. It just will, and vice versa. And you just have to come to terms with that. Like, you know. Stay optimistic, keep working, stay in the hustle, but you have to make some practical decisions at some point. How much time can I spend? You only have so much time.
Yeah, it's a lot about, I think as I've gotten older, I've realized how much it is about balance in your life. You know, when around the time that, excuse me, we first met, you know, we were all 150% in, right. This is the only thing, and do or die, get in our way, and you're going to fry, you know, I mean, it was just like balls to the wall kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
You know, and then my then girlfriend and then wife and I got married in 14. And attitude just like, is this healthy though? Like, is this really a healthy way to live? Is this going to make us make it? And then, you know, kind of taking in all those experiences of those like years, I was like, I don't know if it helped. Did we just spin a lot of wheels? Did the wheels, like occasionally, like when you spin your wheels, you'll get a little bit of traction. But is slow and steady the better way to go? Is focused, having that energy be focused. You know, at the end of the day, you know, you're going to have this life, and then this life is going to end, and you know, not to be too morose, but it's a fact.
It's
fact.
True.
You know, it's the way it is.
It's true.
And it's like, did you partake of everything that you could have, or was it all just about this one thing? And if it was, no matter if that's your passion or not,
Mm-hmm.
um, then that it's just for me, I realized, well, that's not the life I want. I want to have a life that I can look back and go, you had a great full life. You did a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
You were a good person. You helped people. You were didn't take any shit either, but you weren't looking to knock people's blocks off or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's a
Yep.
nice adjustment from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Slightly different attitude, but
Yeah.
yeah, but you learn. And I think and then you grow and you come up with something else like you're doing. You've taken all these steps, and you see the thing that you've done that's very interesting. And I'm always fascinated by this is that you were married and you had kids
Mm-hmm.
early on,
Yeah.
and you still pursued your stuff. Like I made a conscious decision not to get married early or young, and wait and to not have any kids at all.
Mm-hmm.
Those are just our choices. So I'm always impressed with people who were like, no, I did those. Like I got those other aspects of my life because that was important to me,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and that's everybody has their journey and their experience with it.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, so I have 3 kids. I have a son and 2 daughters, and I always tell them, look, I wouldn't change anything, but being a young parent wasn't easy for my oldest is really who I'm talking about and talk to
Mhm.
about this. We grew up together. My financial life was just kind of building, and also just life's lessons that I hadn't learned yet being a young dad. Maybe
Yeah.
makes you patient. And there is a time and a place. There is a right time or a better time to do certain things. And I think raising a family, I do think, make sure you're you got a foundation. We were lucky because we also had a very supportive network of people and family, like my mother-in-law who passed. She's a beautiful woman, helped us raise our kids, and we were fortunate enough to have that.
Hmm.
And there were family members who wouldn't let us fall. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah.
But I know I agree, man. And especially if you're going to go into the arts, not just acting, just my youngest daughter is an extremely talented artist. She goes to a specialized high school for it. She's really gifted. I keep telling her, I keep saying, look, really think about what aspect of the arts you want to be a part of. There's some that's, I'm not, some diehard artists are like, stop thinking about the money. I get that a lot from diehard artists, just create, be passionate.
Hmm.
That's not in my DNA. That's just not the way I operate. I think that if in order for an artist to be able to share the gift they've been given and developed, they need to have some business acumen, and they do need to think
Hmm.
business a bit. I'm not saying if you're fortunate enough to be so talented that you have someone managing the business side of your craft, great, God bless you.
Yeah.
But it takes a while to get there, and you have to enter with, like I'll give you an example in our industry. Writers that I know that I'm really impressed with, they are not just good writers. They actually think about the format, the tone, the content. Is it right for this platform? Netflix wants this stuff. This show, this would be an ABC thing. This would be a Fox thing. This would be I don't know. This would be an HBO thing. They based on the type of genre, they kind of know where this belongs. They know who they're writing to even before they write the characters,
Hmm.
where they write the plot, the story. And I'm no writer for sure, but I'm impressed when someone before they create first thinks through some of that. They're serious about making a product that is consumable and sellable. And I think that's a key in the industry if you want to make a living at it.
Yeah.
Or you could just put whatever the hell you want out there, and every now and then something sticks. That happens too, right?
Yeah.
So everyone's got a different approach. But I think from a balanced sort of analytical point of view, I think you want to do the latter. I think you want to really think about who you want to talk to, who's your audience,
Hmm.
and not just writer, producer, right? I mean, I get an opportunity to talk with producer friends all the time, and those are questions I ask them. Who's this for? Is this
Yeah.
just a passion project? Somebody gave you a script, you like it, great. You like it, good.
Mhm.
Okay, so are you going to buy, $2 million worth of views this year because you
Yeah.
wanted to see it?
Yeah.
Or are you going to ask someone else to spend that money to see it?
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it's got, seems like there's a running theme in our conversation in that an artist to be artistic and to stay artistic needs to balance their art with business and just, some marketing and sales behind the art.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling they'll do better. And even actors that I respect, they seem to know the industry in a different way, like just the way they speak. And they're great at, like, when I've been lucky enough to have a conversation with a series regular on set, where I'm just like the humble walk-on for the day. The way they approach it, they're very smart. And it's rare that I've seen someone at a high level in our industry that doesn't seem to have some of that, call it street smarts or industry smarts. They kind of know what's the next project coming out, who's behind it, what they need to do to get there, what the type they're looking for. They definitely have done their homework from a sales and marketing standpoint. They know their brand very clearly, and they know their type. And that empowers them to get in front of the right people and present their offering.
Right.
So yeah.
And then that's what you help them with. That's what you kind of are working on developing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not, one thing I'm careful to say is I'm not an acting coach. I'm not an industry coach. I actually work with people that are, both as I am a client to some of them. But at the same time, I don't consider myself all that. What I like to do is I like to tell people, this is how you can leverage, ask yourself the basic questions. Where are you now? Where do you want to be? How does the industry see you? Answer those questions. And then I will give advice on what is your presentation package and how can you reach out using digital marketing. And that's it. And depending on the background of the person, the demographic of the person, a younger person naturally who grew up with a cell phone and the internet knows how to present themselves on the internet better than someone who, from like our generation, right? We didn't necessarily grow up on the internet or flat, or screens, but, so there's all types, and I just shift my thinking of how to present, because you can always present yourself better. You can always, you can always do better. So as far as when you ask, what do I do? An example of a website, there's actors know they need headshots. Actors know they need to be online. They don't necessarily know how to present themselves in the best way, right? Or like, I'll sometimes get the question, do I need a website? I'm like, well, if you want one place where you can put everything and you're in control of it, then yes, you need a website. A website by itself is not going to make your career, but it's certainly a helpful thing. So that's an example. And then after that, it's like, well, how do you drive traffic to you? Do you have like simple concepts like email marketing? You're an actor, right? And how do you reach out to people? You reach out on social. That's great. But because of the like Facebook algorithms or Instagram's algorithms, your post may not necessarily make it to everyone you think it's making it to. That's a great example. So why not build an email list of like if you've been in the business 5 or 10 years, you probably know thousands of people right now who actually care about you. Actually, if they get an email in their folder, they won't call it spam. Build that email list and create something. Don't just talk about you. Talk about a little more than just you, but once in a while, share what's going on, in your career. Blast an email out, and it's a basic idea. And I'm actually amazed that simple idea, very few people actually do consistently. As far as actors, business owners trying to sell to those actors, they're definitely doing that. But the actors themselves, they don't. It's just a little example, So that's the kind of way I help people, specifically in our industry.
Oh, it's interesting. It's a very interesting, niche or need that you've realized is there, and you've found a way to kind of devise something that helps create a bridge for people, which I think is great. It's when I first started in '95. I remember, I'm sure you did it too. The breakdowns come out, and you're like, I got to get it as soon as I can, so that I'm able to, get my headshot and resumes in, because after like 50, they're not going to look at it anymore. They're kind of tapped out. It was a real, pain in the ass. And I remember I kept saying to myself all throughout the 90s, why don't they just do this digitally? Like, let me just email my picture and my resume. But instead of all this hassle, it's so unproductive for everybody. And then, whoever, and having then held, put out a breakdown prior to everything being so digital, and getting tons and tons and tons and tons of headshots and resumes, just like nonstop. They just keep on rolling in. You being on that other side, you see the different aspect of it.
Yep.
So we are very much in the digital world. And I do think, like most historical events, they tend to maybe alter our perspective of how we were doing things and how can we do things going forward, and I do think digital is really going to be just get even crazier big. It's going to be really interesting.
Metaverse, man. It's the metaverse. We're all going to be, we're never leaving our houses, man. We're going to have avatars.
There'll be metaverse movies. They'll do movies in the metaverse.
Yeah, exactly.
With metaverse actors.
I'm just latching on to kind of where we're at and where it's going. I had a stint doing some virtual reality stuff where I sold virtual reality equipment. And really brief. And I remember playing some early virtual reality things when I was a teenager, putting on this big ass helmet.
Yeah.
Pod, right? You might recall that thing.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed that we're kind of not already there, to be honest. But the problem is it's expensive. The sensors, the monitors, everything involved. Computer processing power is definitely there to be able to make this stuff work. But the idea of avatar life, there's websites. I was never part of it, but there's I think Second Life.
Yeah, I've heard
virtual
of it.
worlds. Yeah, so that's the virtual life. It has existed for some time, but the idea of like Facebook or Meta or whatever, they I think that is smart. I think we need to get away from these screens. We live in a three-dimensional world. Why are we still dealing with a two-dimensional input or two-dimensional interface? So I think it's a natural progression. The idea of all of us creators and all of us either producing content and creating content is getting a little weird. I was talking today with a friend about, the shortage of labor throughout the world in general. And we were just talking about why. And one natural is people like post 9/11, a lot of people quit their jobs to pursue something else or their passions. And they just took a break because they were really stressed, right?
Yeah.
COVID has obviously caused a lot of life shifts. Relationships have fallen apart. A lot of various changes in people's lives. Some people have quit jobs to retire. So there's a glut. There's a glut on the as far as workers. Some people unfortunately have died, of course. But my friend was like, some people like millennials maybe, or like Gen Z maybe even, they're creating content. Some of these guys, they left their jobs so they can create content, so they can TikTok and create, and I'm like, what? No, they can't be making that much, or to become an OnlyFans. I don't know, whatever your deal is, but like, how much money could you possibly be making? And I don't feel like everybody could be making six figures just creating goofy content.
Yeah.
I don't believe I'm sure I could be wrong. I believe it's like our industry, traditional, I almost feel like the idea of being an actor in front of a camera, working on rehearsed content is becoming archaic.
Right.
This finely polished, finely produced, high production value stuff. I'm being very careful in saying it. It's like it's on its way out. No one cares. No one cares if you're on network television. I feel sometimes. I've been on network television many times, and there's people on like TikTok, just either recycling content or doing some stupid dance that are probably getting more views than I am. Well,
it is a revolution. We had that digital revolution that we were talking about in the beginning. And I know we actually have to wrap up soon because you have a jet, unfortunately. But it is a revolution of, I think, people just not. It used to be, the name actor in your movie. Just having that name actor was all you needed, and now it's not about that. It's about territories. How do they sell in other countries? How do they sell here? Yep. It's a different animal, and people in general, I think, are much more interested in looking to alternative sources. I mean, Joe Rogan, he has more viewers per podcast than CNN has on its entire network. So, exactly. It's
not bad for a guy who's a comedian, right?
A comedian, and he was on news radio. That's when I first knew him, and then he's an MMA announcer, I think, or UFC.
He transitioned his love, like yet another martial art. I love martial arts too. He transitioned his love. Became I think he's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. I don't think he's a black belt yet. But just what a way to kind of just bring all that together in a way
Yeah.
that, that it's good for him and the people his audience.
Yeah, I've seen his spin kick on videos. I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that.
Yeah.
I'd wake up in next week probably, I would think.
You and me both.
So, well, man, this was great. It was awesome to reconnect with you, and I could talk to you for another 45 minutes, but
absolutely, same here, man.
Yeah, but it was great. We'll keep in touch, anyway, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.